Welcome to the Church Explained podcast. We really appreciate you joining us. The Church Explained podcast is a conversation to develop your leadership and grow your church. Our goal in this podcast is to share inspirational insights and ideas to resource leaders and grow teams. Through our conversation with key team players at Icon Church and other invited guests, we really hope that you will grow with us. In this episode, we're going to talk about youth ministry that grows the church. Hi, I'm Dave Mckeown.
And I'm Nathan Benger.
We are the host of this podcast.
Yeah, and no guest today, Dave.
No guest at all. You are the guest.
Yeah.
And the host at the same time.
Yeah, so I've got to do both jobs.
You got to do both. And maybe, yeah?
Usually the guest would sit here, so do I have to
Well, you can do. You can swap across if you want, if that helps you, just to get in the groove.
Yeah. And build up a sweat before the end of the podcast.
Let's do that. It's so exciting to be here. You've been, Nathan, been involved in youth ministry for over 12 years.
Yep.
And obviously a lot of experience. You've seen a developing youth over this time. You've seen growth. And we want to sort of draw out this idea of, because a lot of churches, they don't do youth ministry, they'll do youth clubs. So come on, let's try and draw that out a little bit. For those people watching, leaders connected, and maybe people are thinking of doing something with their youth, what's the difference between a youth club and a youth ministry?
Yeah, so like a little bit of our story is, you know, when me and my wife Debbie got asked to take on youth ministry, we had 8 young people. Over the years, we've reached like hundreds of young people. But that started from a conference that my lead pastor went to. And
lead pastor being your dad.
Being my dad, who went to a conference, and one of the guys who got up to speak, who wasn't due to speak, his first phrase, I think it was what the UK needs is not more youth clubs, but more youth ministries.
Yeah.
And instantly in that moment, it was like, my dad had this download from heaven. Basically, this is what we need to do. And so we took it out of like a small group, 8 young people in somebody's house, rented the school we're in, didn't have the money to do it, but decided to step out in faith, rented the school we're in, and there started our youth ministry. And the difference between like youth club and youth ministry is youth club is let's put on a load of activities. So let's get the snooker table out, let's get the table tennis table out, let's get the video games out, let's do that. And if we're running a 2-hour program, they can just hang out and do that. They can buy, you need a tuck shop if you're going to run a successful youth event.
Indeed.
So let's do all of that, let the young people hang out, and then we'll stop them having that moment, like even if they're mid-game, we'll stop you and let's do our 10-minute God slot.
Yeah. And
so many times you see young people disconnect. There's so much, just a big difference between, just like church and that youth club.
Yeah. So let me just pause there and sort of interject a little bit. Do you think churches do that, or church leaders do that because they're frightened that young people won't engage? They're thinking, well, just give them 10 minutes, and hopefully if we can keep their interest for 10 minutes, we've run an amazing youth event.
Yeah, and some people can run great youth clubs. Like, they can attract a whole load of young people from the community.
So there's nothing wrong with running youth club,
Nothing wrong with running youth club. Actually, when we initially started, once a month we would run what we called like our social event, or you might call it in church terms, like your bridging event, where we'd run this big event where it was like this non-threatening environment to invite your friends to.
Yeah.
But the following week, so we made sure on that night our invitation to the following week was strong.
Yeah. Because
we knew the next week, like, they're going to get in an environment and an atmosphere that is going to be full of God's presence. We're going to have young people on fire for God, passionately worshiping, and we're going to preach the message of Jesus. And so I think sometimes there is the fear factor of, will young people get this? Will young people turn up? Will we be able to reach young people? Or will they be turned off by it? And I think in some aspect they can be, but we have to become relevant to them in a way that actually it reaches into their life.
Yeah, I like that, the importance about being relevant. Now that can be a struggle sometimes for church leaders.
Yeah.
And because it depends what type of church they're running, first of all, because some churches aren't relevant. Not that we're against any type of church, because we're passionate about all churches growing. But let's say, for example, someone's watching and maybe their church isn't that relevant, but they want to do something in the youth. How do they go about it? What's the steps they can take?
Well, I think the first step is who's there. Like, what young people have you got?
Yeah.
And, we're called to make disciples. So it starts there. Like, I've had a phrase for many years now: if I can get young people on fire for God, and if I can get young people on fire for reaching their friends, that then, that's kind of like my starting point, is who's there. One of the keys for me around youth ministry is how you frame the night, really, and how that looks. Like, there's going to be worship.
Describe that a little bit to us, because
so
just open that up a bit. What is it? What does that look like for you then?
Yeah, so like a 2-hour program. First 30 minutes is like that youth club style. Let's hang out. Pumping music. It's good atmosphere.
Yeah.
Young people hanging out, because relationships are key for young people.
Yeah.
And then like for us, we've got a foyer and auditorium, but we didn't used to have that where we used to meet. So it would basically be like, we're going to go in, we're going to start the program, and that might be a game up front game where, you do crazy things. Kind of like, I ask our youth leaders always the question, what crazy things are you willing to do for young people to have a good time?
That's a real test of leadership, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, that's the key in youth ministry. You've got to be willing to laugh at yourself. And that's what can make it really relevant, that actually we don't take ourselves too seriously. Then it would be worship. And I know some people, like, as soon as I said worship, they're going, I ain't got a worship team.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't have a worship team when we started.
So what did you do? Because you're talking like 12 years ago. You said you had 8 people. What did you do? Because if you've no worship team, no big event stuff around you, come on, just help people sort of plan that out a little bit in their minds if they're like that.
I wouldn't do it like this today, because technology has moved on.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But we had an iTunes playlist that crossfaded the songs.
Yeah, very good.
But a key for me was, like, I saw a generation worshiping. I saw hundreds of young people worshiping. That was kind of like a vision from God. That's what I believed. That's what I saw. But that had to start there and then. So I remember a conversation with Debbie before the very first Friday night, and basically said, look, this is going to be awkward.
Yeah.
We got no worship team. We're going to put words on a screen. It's going to iTunes playlist that's going to crossfade. We set the atmosphere. We set the culture. So if we want young people to worship, it starts tonight with us. So like first song, it's an upbeat praise song. We're jumping.
Yeah.
We're going to go for it. In the worship songs, we're going to raise our hands. We're going to sing out. We're going to do all of that. And so that's where it started. Like today, like YouTube's available.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it, really?
So, and you can create YouTube playlists.
Yeah.
You've got all that technology. Even if, like today, you've got someone in your youth ministry or even in your church who's willing to volunteer, who can sing.
Yeah.
You've got the ability to use tracks.
Yeah.
And technology has moved on so much from that opening time when we did, that there are options like, I don't have a drummer, well, just drop it in the tracks. There are so many options that are available. So it would be worship. We'd take an offering, which like some people don't, hey, let's teach young people what the Bible says about giving.
Let's just try and draw that out a bit as well. Why were you taking an offering? Why were you doing worship?
Well, it was creating this culture of worship in terms of, this is what we do. But getting their eyes off of, so like worship for me very much takes my eyes off me and onto God.
Yeah.
And it's those moments in worship that can even soften hearts.
Yeah.
And we were very intentional in terms of what we did in worship and the types of songs we would do. So much so that I remember once being stood next to some young people their first time in, and they literally said about our band, they could go on Britain's Got Talent. Because it was like, it was like relevant.
Yeah.
And it was like stuff that they were listening to. I think that's a way we can be relevant, is actually think about, some of the style on those nights.
Yeah. I think that's important, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. And so, but it's a discipleship thing as well for the young people that we have, that actually gets them to take their eyes off themselves and onto God.
Yeah.
So we do that worship, we do an offering, again, another discipleship moment. We're not expecting young people to give loads of money, but we're going to teach.
So it's the principle you're teaching rather than, hey, we need your money to run this youth event or youth night. It's more to do with the principle, isn't it? That's what you were trying to do there.
Yeah, exactly. And setting those foundations for their future as well.
And I can see that out working in the sense, like, because when they go from an atmosphere like that and you invite them into church on a Sunday, then actually there's a lot of the same components there, isn't there?
Exactly.
It's not just, okay, they may not be doing all the fun stuff beforehand, although they probably could do in some settings. But you've got worship there, you've got an offering there, and then obviously you've got the message there as well. Tell us a wee bit about the message. What type of message would you bring on a night like that?
I mean, we've talked about everything.
Yeah.
Like we've talked through tithing and giving. But really, so like I talk about those early days where we do these social events. The following week would be we'd be really intentional. We're going to preach the gospel. Yeah. But we talk about all of the things that get taught, Bible, everything. But what was key for us is we've got to relate it to young people and where they're at. Okay. One of the key questions I always used to ask myself, and still do today, anything I do in youth, is what would 16-year-old me love? Yeah. What would if I'm leading young people, what would 16-year-old me follow? So I'm really passionate in front of young people because I think passion is contagious. It is. And I think 16-year-old me, I used to follow passion like anything. And so it was that passion that was key in terms of leading young people. But that question, so I'd write a message, what would 16-year-old me think about that message? Yeah. What would this 16-year-old, what would they think about it? So thinking of a youth leader or a youth team, that's a good question to ask, isn't it? What are young people thinking about? I mean, one of the things you mentioned earlier was this idea of relationship. Why do you think that's important? I'm just imagining, you've got young people coming in to your youth event, your youth ministry. They're turning up from school. Some of them have never even been in a church setting. Tell me a wee bit of the walkthrough. How do they get from there, where they've just come in the door? Yeah. They've come with a couple of mates. They don't know what they expect, and then they're at some point down the line leading something in the church, because that's the experience. That's what we've seen, isn't it, at the Icon Church? We've seen that development. Definitely. So help us a little bit with that word relationship. What does that mean, and how does that work out in the lives of a young person coming in the door? Maybe doesn't even believe in God. Maybe I'm sure you've got a story you could share on something like that. Yeah, I mean, framing our whole youth ministry. Asking questions like, thinking about the young people, what's the greatest barrier for young people? Yeah. Relationships. What's the greatest benefit? Relationships. I like that. That's good. And so we base everything around these three relationships. Yeah. So firstly, and if you talk to any of our youth leaders, just say relationship, and they'll know exactly what you're talking about. I'm going to test that next time I see them. Test it. Right, tell me who you're going to ask so I can prepare them now. I'm joking. No, they'll get it. Yeah. Firstly, it's relationship with friends. Yep. They'll come in with a friend, we get young people on fire for reaching their friends, so they'll come in with a friend. But initially, when they come in, we're attaching them to a small group, what we call connect groups. We're attaching them to a connect group. So straight away, it's not just them and their friend. Yeah. They're attached into a group already. And so there's a group of people, and we talk to our young people about, hey, new people, welcome them, make them feel like they belong here. We have a phrase, you can belong before you believe. And so, get them into that environment of friendships. Because when that friend they came with doesn't come in 2 weeks' time because they've got, mum's 40th birthday or whatever, they still feel like they can come because it's not attached just to that one friendship. They've built other friendships within it. They've connected with a group. Yeah. And, just drawn out that idea of, belonging before you believe. That's an interesting thought that maybe not everybody listening to the podcast would fully get that. Can you just share a wee bit more on that? Give me an example. Someone's come to Icon Church Youth. You've seen them. Maybe they don't believe at all. Yeah. A great example is who is our Rotherham campus pastor now. Yeah. Nathan Blood. Yeah. Shout out to you, mate. Yeah. Well done, mate. He came into youth.
Does he follow Jesus actually?
Yeah, he's just made a decision.
We're
We're
just checking that out, really, aren't we?
But like he came into youth, like his friend Dan, brought him into youth. Really passionate about music, like science. Like he's doing his PhD now, like crazy, whilst also being a campus pastor.
Yeah, doing a good job though.
Yeah, he's doing an amazing job. And so he come into youth, and I get a message after the youth night, which basically said, I don't believe in the God stuff. And he'd got loads of these like questions that like literally as a 15-year-old lad, 16-year-old lad, he's using words that I'd never even heard of at times in these questions. And he said, but I love the kind of like the friendship side of it. Can I keep coming? And I'm like, yeah, of course you can.
So that's the belong before you believe.
Yeah. Fast forward, 4 weeks later, we do a night. It's like one of, like we framed it as one of our big nights. He was in a band with Dan. I told them they could play as long as they play no songs with any swearing or anything like that. Let me vet the songs beforehand. Anyway, that night, he gives his life to Jesus.
Amazing.
Has this incredible encounter with Jesus. But that 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So 4 weeks from like that opening relationship, now he's a campus pastor, leads our creative with his wife across all of our church. But that started as a person who belonged before they believed and could outwork their journey and their faith. And he had loads of questions, and many times I'd just answer his question, and then at the bottom I'd be like, I'm praying that God reveals himself to you, because I really needed God to reveal himself, because sometimes the questions are like, way above me. But it is that opening relationship. But actually it speaks into the next relationship as well, which would be, so you got relationship with friends and then a relationship with a leader.
Get it.
So he felt like he could message me. We'd obviously made some level of connection. But again, when a young person comes into our youth ministry, they're straight into a small group that's full of young people, but it's also led by at least 2 of our leaders.
Yeah.
And so straight away they have someone they can talk to. And, for lots of young people, they're journeying out many different things in life. And it goes back even belong before they believe. What a great, we want to create an atmosphere where they feel like I can come with those questions. Yeah. I can come and I'm not going to feel judged. I'm not going to feel condemned. I'm not going to feel like I'm in the wrong. I can do that. And part of our, we have a what we do as youth leaders. And I haven't written this down, so I'm hoping I can remember this off the top of my head. But we encourage spiritual growth. We contact them weekly. We pray for them. We create memorable moments. It comes down to the question, what crazy things are you willing to do for young people to have a good time? Yeah. We remember special occasions. So like a youth leader will be remembering when their birthday is, when something comes up. And the last thing on our list of what we do is we connect them to church.
That's a good one, that.
So it's not just, we're just getting them here on a Friday. We're going to connect them to church. Yeah. And that's a key. So that'd be the second relationship. And then the third relationship ultimately is a relationship with God.
That's the big end. But actually, for many young people, they're not going to get that until they encounter the other 2, are they?
Just that.
Do you know what I mean?
Seems we came up with that, and it seems to be a lot of young people's journey. Yeah, that becomes the journey.
You've seen that outplayed so many times. Relationship with the in the group, relationship with the leader, then relationship with God. Yeah. I mean, that maybe will just help people just frame that a little bit as they're thinking about building a youth ministry. Maybe they're thinking of shifting from a youth club style to a youth ministry. Yeah. Do you think then someone, trying to set up a youth ministry, do they need to come up with their own vision, all the stuff they need? Tell us a little bit about that. Do they need a separate vision than the church?
No. And I'll expand on it.
that was short and sweet.
Yeah.
Okay, come on. Let's just open that up. Why not then?
So for me, youth ministry is not a silo. It's not its own thing off to the side. And I think this is where sometimes when we're talking about youth ministry that builds church, sometimes we get this wrong because we chuck youth. So in a church context, we chuck youth out there that it's its own thing and it can kind of do its own thing. Yeah. Or as youth, we become our own thing, and what can happen is we can then you know, this can even happen. We can talk badly about the church, or we can say things
Yeah,
phrases like they'll never come to church because it's kind of like outdated or whatever it is. And, you know, part of me is like, no, like, I want, like, reframe the language. We've just not led young people to attach themselves to church. And the problem is because we've got two separate visions, two separate ways of going. Actually, our job as a youth ministry, we say this phrase, youth ministry exists to build the church.
I like that.
Not
That's
the other way
very good.
around.
Yeah.
Not the church exists to build the youth ministry. Youth ministry exists to build the church. So if this is the vision of our church, and this is it, we outwork that in a youth context.
Okay.
So like our mission statement says, build relevant contemporary churches. Well, I just take that and go, I have to build a relevant contemporary youth ministry.
Yeah.
Our mission statement says, reaches people with the message of Jesus. Well, I just reframe that's young people I'm reaching.
Yeah.
And then, you know, our mission statement says, empowering people to lead in every sphere of life. Well, I'm going to build some leaders.
Yeah.
We say our youth ministry is a leadership factory.
Yeah.
I'm going to build some leaders. The problem is when we separate that, then we try and connect them to the church. It's like two different things.
Too much of a gap there,
Yeah.
and maybe, you know, like as you say, I think that older type model where it was separate, actually, young people didn't want to go to church then, did they? Because they think, well, it's not relevant to me. There's no point there. I don't know anybody.
Yeah.
But I think what you've been brilliant at doing, Nathan, is the fact that you've connected the both together, so that gap between what happens on a Friday night, if it is a Friday night, and what happens on a Sunday night, there's hardly any difference there, is there really? Do you know what I mean? Same components. You've got your worship, you've got your giving, you've got your message. Not that we're all about giving, let's just say that today, but it's having those components so that young people are used to those things. So when they get there, I suppose, then they're experiencing
it's not alien.
It's not alien.
It's not foreign to them.
No. So there's a lot of stuff there about building young people, developing leaders.
Yeah.
12 years you've been doing this, so come on, share with people listening in this podcast. How many leaders do you think you've been managed to develop? Now I'm saying you, but I'm saying it's also the team, isn't it? So, but I'm directing it at you. So think of the leaders, people you've developed over the years, because that's got to be the thing that builds a church, is developing leaders.
Yeah, I mean, like, for us, our central campus and where we started this is in Chesterfield, which is a town. Yeah. No university. So I'm trying to address some of the excuses that come along. Yeah. Like, we don't have a university, so when they're 18, they leave. Yeah. And, you know, so like we've talked to young people about this cause, this vision, like, stick around. You get to be part of this as the church and, you know, like, go to university close by. So you can be close to it. So we've had people, Sheffield University got 2 universities. We started a campus in Derby University. Nottingham University's close, all of that. But that's been attaching them to the church's vision, not just youth ministry. And that's been key because that's helped the development through of that. There are certain young people who, like, are literally smart enough to go to Oxford and Cambridge, and you, like, pray for them, bless them. You should go there. Or if you're going to do something specific to a university that, like, is the best university for that, go and do it.
I really want to say something about the other universities, but I shouldn't really say that.
No.
Because that would be too good.
Yeah.
So you've the idea is get them in passion. So that they want to stay around, get connected. Even if they go to university, they still want to be part of something because they can see the purpose there. They can see this is worthwhile connecting their lives to. So let's think of leaders then. I'm going to push you a little bit. How many leaders? Come on, give me an estimate, because it does. Because remember, you started with 8 people.
Oh, so
what's the journey? How many leaders do you think?
And all at different stages, but I would say it would be around 60, 65 leaders. But then there's other people who have been in our youth ministry who have led in different, like, I'm just thinking of people who've led in youth, but there's others who have also then led in different areas, like kids ministry. who have been part of our youth ministry and attached themselves to the vision of church. And it might not have been in youth, but it's been in kids ministry.
Yeah.
It's been in other areas, connect groups.
So right across the board then, really, not
Yeah.
just in youth. So what I'm not saying is how many youth leaders have you
No.
developed, how many leaders, and I think that's the thing, the fact that those
Yeah.
people are serving in other areas,
Yeah.
doing other stuff. Let's just push it in a little bit further because we're running out of time a little bit, but we could be here all day on this, couldn't we?
I know.
Because it's so exciting. I sense your passion, your desire to reach young people. So when it comes to a young person's come, they've been part of the environment, they've made a decision, like how long are you waiting before you get them involved in church?
Well, for some young people, it's the first time they come.
Yeah.
Like just getting them serving. Even a story is, we had a parent come to us once and said, I'd love to get my, a young lad in church, but he's just into computers. And they just recently made a decision. So the young lad's never been in church, never made a decision. Is there any way, like, he can get involved? And we're like, yeah, let's get him on doing the words on the screen.
Yeah.
And, like with somebody doing that, and he gets to see the software that we use, he gets to see the computers we use, he gets to do all of that. And that was his first entry point. Now, a few years later, he's made a decision, been a youth leader, led in kids, done all of that. But his first entry point was actually serving and being involved. And I think that, like, get them involved in serving. I'm a pastor's kid. And one of the keys for me being a pastor's kid is that I've gone on the journey with my parents of building church. Yeah. So much so that I grab a hold of that vision and I'm part of it massively. Now, I don't want that to be exclusive to pastors' kids or leaders' kids. No, let's get some young people involved, serving, so they go along that journey and they feel called and feel like I'm part of the church's vision and I get to do this. Yeah,
so brilliant, Nathan. There's so much stuff that we've talked about. Come on, if we can just round it up, give us maybe 2 or 3 practical things a leader could do. Maybe they're not running a youth club. Maybe they're running a youth ministry, but it's maybe just plateauing.
Yeah.
Or it's stuck at a certain level, or because everything's online, it's gone downhill a little bit.
Yeah.
Come on, we'll give 2 or 3 things just as we wrap up. Then what would be your advice? Because you've done a brilliant job with the team, haven't you? So we want to draw that out of you. You know, what 2 or 3 things would you offer people?
Well, I think we're at a great moment where actually we'll probably come out of online very soon and we'll be able to gather again. Yeah. So it's a great starting point. To
start something new.
Yeah, to start something new, or to even set a new culture, a new atmosphere around what you're going to do. I think the first thing is it starts with you. So what do you see? Attached to the church's vision, what do you see?
Very good.
And then you have to model that. So like I talked about me and Debbie, that first youth night, that didn't just happen on the first youth night. It had to happen on the second and the third and the fourth and the fifth, and constantly. Even to today, we're still doing that. We're still setting that culture of worship. This is what we want. And I think that's where it starts. So for somebody today, that's like key, that's important. What do you see? Attached to the church's vision, what do you see? Maybe it's even, I take some time to talk to my senior pastor and key. Go, do you know what do you see for youth ministry? What do you see attached to the church's vision? What do we see? And then begin to model, begin to set a culture and an atmosphere. Like even just take that relationship and think, how do I design what we do around young people are able to build relationship with friends, relationship with a leader, but relationship with God? How do I do that? And then thirdly, there may be youth ministries, youth pastors out there who, like you're a little bit strapped for time, resources, all of that, then we'd love to help.
We would.
Firstly, contact us. Even if you're a senior pastor and you're like, hey, we want to start a youth ministry that builds the church, but we don't know, like, where do we go? Then get in touch with us.
Yeah,
we'd love to help you, but also we're setting up, we've got Icon Open, which has resources on there that you can use.
Yeah, youth resources.
Take
them, use them in their own setting, free of charge.
Take them, use them, free of charge, make them better.
Yeah.
And then tell us how you made them better.
Yeah.
But like, utilize all that, because that was key for us starting. We tried to find resources that would help us in building youth ministry.
So I love that, the fact that we have resources there. We want to equip people, we want to resource churches and teams. So I think just to pick up on that, if churches are out there, they want to connect with us, we'd love for them to connect with us. We'd love to help them. The 3 great points, you've said there, it's about seeing, it's about that relationships, and it's about actually then connecting the senior pastors and seeing what they want to do as well. So brilliant stuff, Nathan. Thanks for sharing with us today. I haven't even made you move to the other side. No. But plenty of time yet if you want to do that. So it's been so good to chat around youth ministry versus a youth club. We're not saying a youth club is bad, but we're saying we really do believe a youth ministry is a better way
and it can build the church.
To build the church. So thanks, Nathan, for sharing. We appreciate that.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for listening to the Church Explained podcast. Remember, wherever you're consuming this content, then like it, subscribe to it, share it, get the message out there of the Church Explained podcast. Maybe you know someone who would benefit from hearing what was shared today, then please share that with them. Also want to mention that we have all of those free resources available at icon.church/open. Resources around youth ministry, but not just exclusively youth ministry. Resources around building the church, growing ministries, and anything you want to find, just go on there. And also make contact with us. If you've got any questions, anything that you want us even to talk about on the podcast, then you can ask those questions. It's been great that we've been able to gather together and do this together, and we're really excited for our next podcast, in which we're going to talk and explore the subject of why senior leaders need a coach, and we look forward to seeing you then.